Okay, so today's event is all about Unit 2 Standardisation. It's a new type of event that Edexcel are running for the GCSE drama specification, and the idea is that it gives you an opportunity to go through what your moderator will go through when they are looking at your materials that you'll be submitting on May the 15th. You should have been granted a pack that would have been sent to all centres, and that is a full standardisation pack including Units 1 and Units 2 material. What you need to do is to really pay attention at the end of the presentation if you haven't received that pack, because I can tell you exactly how to get hold of the DVD. But all the written materials for Unit 2 will be available for you to download at the end of today's event. Okay, so just a really quick intro into what the event is about, and then a bit more about you and who you guys are. I'm sure I was introduced earlier. My name is Clea Wiltshire and I am the Principal Moderator for Unit 2 as well as for Unit 1. So it is my great pleasure to give you the opportunity to have a fuller understanding of the standard for both papers in the unit. Now you'll notice that we mention both papers because you've got paper 1, which is your practical paper, the exploration part of the unit, paper 2, which is the written paper, and for this unit, paper 2 is made up of 2 tasks. You're going to have a chance today to do a bit of reviewing of materials. Now it says they're pre-standardised. The idea is that you've received your pack, you've had a chance to do some standardisation prior to the event, and you are ready then to go ahead. But we do understand how busy it is in schools. I'm a working teacher myself, so I really do understand. And the reality is that many of us don't have time to do that preparation before coming on events such as today. Don't worry, the standard and the activities you do today you can take back to your centre and to the materials that you have in your centre to complete the stand activity. There is going to be an opportunity for you to hear the moderator marks and comments for the work that we review. Now we can't review everything today because there simply isn't time. These online sessions are adapted from live face-to-face events, which are longer obviously. So what we're trying to do is to squash a half day into a 2-hour slot. But you will have the opportunity to take away those moderator marks and comments again as part of the download at the end of the pack. So it's really all about refreshing your understanding of the national standard. Now the bottom I think is perhaps the most important thing. Today is also about you asking questions. It's not just about you read, we all sit in silence online, I tell you the marks and we move on, because that's not really helpful to anyone. Many of us as drama practitioners in schools are working in very small departments, working on our own. So it's really important that given that we're able to ask questions when we need to. And so to hopefully support you in your question asking, we're also going to have a look before we start at the Edexcel homepage. But first of all, I'd like to find out a little bit more about who all of you are, and we have got a poll for you to look at, which is quite simply, who are you? And who are you? You might be an NQT who's new to Edexcel. You might be somebody who's taught Edexcel in the past, just as you did with the previous poll about can you hear me. Just click on the appropriate box. And Merlin, I actually can't see the poll at the moment. No doubt that is also my fault as well. Thank you so much, that's brilliant. Okay, so an NQT new to Edexcel. Did you see what I did there, guys? Just a little bit of improvisation. NQT with experience of Edexcel, teacher new to Edexcel, or possibly teacher with experience of Edexcel. And it may well be that you're new to Edexcel because you haven't taught this specification. Maybe you taught the last specification, and I've certainly met teachers this year who have done that. Okay, so it's looking as though We're very much an experienced body of teachers. Now, we've got one colleague who's voted as being new to Edexcel. What I would say is that, in a way, if you're an experienced Edexcel person, and I'm assuming experience may well go back several years, it can be difficult when you've got a new specification. It may appear that the standard is new because we're judging the work based on different assessment criteria. So that's where you're really hopefully going to benefit from today. Okay, so I talked about how we're going to look at the Edexcel homepage. A homepage that I'm sure is saved as a favourite on your computer, and a page that you probably know and love. But there's a few really key aspects of that page. So Merlin, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the screen share of the GCSE drama homepage. And what I'm going to do is talk you through some of the really important documents that you can and must find on this page. I did one of these online events yesterday, and I found actually that during the event I got a lot of questions about things that had been covered at this point. I absolutely understand why, because it's a lot of information to take in. But what I would say is just possibly put a couple of notes down if there are headings or headers that you think, well, that's going to be really important to me. Don't sort of feel, oh, I'm going to miss something if I write stuff down. Equally, do spend time after the event going through and having a bit of a browse on the homepage. Okay, so Merlin actually is controlling the page, not me, so I'm going to be directing him as to where we're going to look. I'm going to start off on the left-hand side under the overview, the fourth tab down, which says training. Okay, and this is really important because this is where, if you want to get onto a Unit 1 event online or live, you click on training, and at the bottom of the training page, highlighted in blue, there is a link that says training from Edexcel. When you click on that link, it will show you all the events that are currently running. It also shows you other online events that are running, and you just need to do a little bit of a search there. Now, I know we're very full on a lot of our events, but we are putting on as many more as budget will allow. Don't forget, these standardisation events for Units 1 and 2 are free, so there are budgetary considerations there. But do keep checking. Once Merlin has just showed you how you can search for these events, you probably had to do this to book on to the event that you're on now, but it's just really useful to see how many events that are running. And yeah, they are really popular. You can see a lot of falls there. Merlin, do you mind going back to the main GCSE drama homepage for me now? Do keep checking those events. If you have a look at the bottom of this page here, you can see there's a window with a play button in it. And this is what a previous, that's right, Merlin, absolutely there. This is, we don't need to click on this because that would be slightly strange. That would be you hearing another person's voice from a previous online event. But just to show you that online events from the past and these online events will be posted on the website. So you're going to be able to access information for Unit 1, even if you couldn't get onto a Unit 1 event. And all you would do is just literally find that on the website, click on play, and away you go. So very, very useful. And this particular one is about the changes to the specification following the linear accreditation, which are pretty minimal, but there's some interesting discussion from colleagues on there, so you might want to take a look at that one as well. Okay, moving up into just above that window, and there's a tab called Controlled Assessment. And I'd just like you to click on that one for me, Merlin, and that populates some more choices below. And you can see a list of documents at the top there, your controlled assessment record cards, both in PDF and Word format. These are the very important assessment forms that you're going to be completing for your students. You may have already started completing those for units that you've done earlier. The Word documents can be downloaded and boxes can be expanded, and you can type directly in. The PDFs, obviously, you would download and print, so it's entirely up to you which you do. There's also fifth document down is a Controlled Assessment FAQ document that's well worth having a look at. And also you've got the sixth one down, the Controlled Assessment Teacher Support Book. So if you've got any questions about what can and what can't we do in terms of controlled assessment, this is a drama specific document that has actually been used by other subjects in Edexcel as a model of how to support subject specific questions. So I hope you'll find it useful. It's a free document, it's well worth downloading. It has been updated to reflect the changes to the linear specifications. So what you've got there is version 2. So even if you had version 1, I'd recommend that you download version 2. Okay, going down to the bottom of the page now, some other important documents here. You can see these headings called exemplar materials, and fourth from the bottom we've got a document which is all about access arrangement for example materials. The most recent example materials, which are the 2012 ones, will be secure downloads, and this document tells you how to access those. You basically need your results plus password and username, but it's all in this document. And if you look at the second from the bottom, you can see Drama 5 DR01 2012. That is a series of documents and examples, and it shows you work that is at level 1 and level 2 in particular. And we've got documents for Unit 1 and for Unit 2 there. And the other example materials are the 2009 materials, which were when the specification was first produced. Also well worth having a look at. You've got a wider range of levels on those example materials. Okay, Mel, if you could just bring me back up to the top of this documents box. We've also got a really important section, which is all about the administrative information for the specification. So Merlin, if you could click on admin information for me at the top there. Okay, and you've got some information about your key dates and so on there. So again, worth having a look at. And finally, if you can go right back up to the top, Merlin, and have a look at teacher support materials, which is on the right hand side, sorry, right up to the top under documents. Down a little bit, that's it, teacher support materials. That's great. Okay, you've got another link here to those assessment forms that we spoke about, but most importantly, on the left hand side, the first bullet point, we've got a document called the Administrative Support Guide. For experienced people, this is something that we used to call the ICE, the Instructions for the Conduct of the Examination. It's now called the ASG. So it's really your absolute Bible for getting through the admin of the exam. Do make sure that you download and read that carefully. And many of the questions that you asked me today, I guarantee, would be answered by that document. There's a lot more stuff on the website. I'm not going to spend any more time going through it now, but I am going to say, please do take the time to have a look at this when you have the time. And I know that time is very precious. We don't have a lot of time in schools these days, but this is well worth your time and your effort. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at one of the first documents from the standardisation pack, and it's the record of work. I'm just going to take us back to the PowerPoint very briefly though as well, or I'm going to ask Merlin to do that for me, so we can think about why it is that the record of work is important, and hopefully what you would have received already in your pack. So sorry Merlin, would you mind bringing that PowerPoint back over for me so that delegates can see that? Obviously the record of work is it's your record of what your students actually did in the unit that they completed on Blood Brothers in this case, but it might be any text that you've done. It's very important to make it clear that this record of work is not a scheme of work, and your record of work needs to meet the requirements, or to show that your students have met the requirements of the specification. So they need to have covered a full and substantial playtext. That's not the same as a long playtext. You can have a short but substantial play text. So do consider your choice of play text very, very carefully. And it's exploration of the play text. I know I've said that once, I'm saying it again because what I want you to try and imagine is that I'm holding in my hands a large beach ball, and that beach ball is the world of the play text. And exploring the text, what your students are doing is they are diving in to that beach ball, to that world of the play text, through your chosen path, your chosen key extracts from the text. And as they are doing that, they're using the 4 strategies, which is the minimum, the 2 examples of the medium, which again is the minimum, and the opportunities to use specific elements of drama. And it's important that you do really keep that image in your mind of that large ball that represents the world of the play text, because sometimes what we get is people bouncing off the ball and going off in different directions and developing endings that didn't happen in the original play text, and developing relationships that never got a chance to get to this point because of what the playwright actually wrote. Okay, so everything you do in Unit 2 is all about the play. Now what Merlin's done is he's unsynced the document. I'm just reading out now what he's saying to you there, so that you can individually scroll and zoom through the document. And I've got an open question for you guys. How far does this record of work show extracts and activities enabling the students to gain a greater understanding of the whole text? So you're thinking about, I'm a moderator. This is a vital piece of evidence. Does this piece of evidence actually help my moderator, these students, have a greater understanding of the play text than when they began? Just spend a little bit of time having a scroll through. We've allocated about 5 minutes to look at the record of work, so you really are skim reading. And then as soon as you've got any thoughts, and it may be before you finish the whole document, just type them in to the discussion chat window. Any thoughts that you've got at all, and you might be suggesting thoughts about the chosen extracts. You might be suggesting that the activities are too challenging, lack challenge. You'll be thinking about the timings of the record of work. Really try and imagine that you're a moderator. What is this record of work telling you? Okay, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to read in peace. Okay, so I've got a few comments coming through from you. There's one thing I must really say before I start to address those comments, and that is that just really bear in mind when we're thinking about these materials how very grateful at Edexcel we are to the real centre and the actual students who sent us their work. It's quite a procedure because we have to get the centre permission from the head of centre, the drama teacher, and the permission of the parent of every child in the GCSE drama class, not just the children whose work is sampled, because obviously on the DVD we've got images of children that are subject to data protection. So it is quite a procedure. It's also quite nerve-wracking to film your session and have it sent out to every centre in the country. And what do? We look at work, and obviously there's going to be criticism that we might make, some of which may be negative as well as positive. So do bear that in mind. We are immensely grateful to this centre, and I know that you will all be hugely respectful of that in your comments. Okay, just a couple of the first questions first comments that came up. Rachel's talking about how the questions are clearly focused on memes, which is helpful. And Shamimara, if I've got that wrong, students read a key scene to help introduce key themes in characters and new strategies to explore the text. So at the basic level, we've got a well-presented record of work. We've got helpful structure to the record of work. And just going to say to Shamimara again, you should be able to scroll down to exam sessions 2 and so on, just by using that bar on the side there. Okay, a couple of more critical comments though that are coming through, and it is very useful to look at this work from a teaching point of view. Lindsay says, I do feel that some of the lessons lacked enough depth of exploration. not enough extension tasks to push the students. And I think that's a really valid point, Lindsay, though never forgetting that what you're seeing with this record of work is a record of work tailored to meet the needs of those students. You, as the teacher assessor, make the judgment of how much can your students take in each session and what is going to be supportive without overloading them, without leaving them with too much time and not enough to do. And that can vary immensely from centre to centre. This is why Edexcel has not and never will produce for GCSE drama an example blueprint of the perfect record of work, because it doesn't exist. There's only the perfect record of work for these students that you have in front of you this year. So depth and challenge, really important, must be tailored to the needs of the students. And again, we've got another comment here from Dominic reflecting that. It would be good as a moderator to know how long this session was. Absolutely, it would be really useful, wouldn't it? Timings are so important, because sometimes your planned sessions take not an even amount of time. You might plan 6 sessions, but 2 of them might take 45 minutes and 2 might take an hour and 15 minutes. And don't forget that your activities where students are gaining knowledge of the text, they're reading the text, are not going to be part of that 6 hours of practical assessment. So if you have a 1-hour lesson and you spend 20 minutes reading and discussing the text, your assessment would start at 21 minutes. And that's also helpful information to go onto your record of work. The record of work doesn't need to all be beautifully typed up like this. If you want to work from a planned scheme and annotate by hand, that is very good practice, and it shows the record of work for what it is, a working document. Don't forget as well that you need to make sure that your record of work is one submitted per teaching group in your centre. Okay, has raised the question of off-text tasks and whether we are allowed to do those. And we've got a few more comments saying about how the activities perhaps lack challenge there. Okay, so I'm just going to address those 2 points now to begin with. First of all, as regards off-text, remember my image of the beach ball. It's very frustrating talking just with my voice as a drama teacher, because if you could see me, I'm waving my arms frantically around, sat here in my study with no one to see. The beach ball, the world of the play. Everything that you do needs to be contained within the world of the play. So we're looking at Blood Brothers here, which is a very popular text for GCSE drama students. Mickey and Eddie and Noel People's Home, an improvisation that's off text, that is not appropriate because it doesn't help us to understand the actual ending of Blood Brothers. And it presupposes a complete alternative that wasn't written by Willie Russell. Off text, however, to explore the motives of Mickey in that final scene in Blood Brothers and what has driven him to come to that. So perhaps maybe looking at an improvisation where Mickey is considering his different options, maybe looking at a conscience alley task. There's many different kinds of off-text activities which are absolutely fine, and there's some very good guidance about that on the website. If you're unclear about off-text, really suggest you go back to the website and check that guidance. Again, just talking about the idea of depth and challenge, I think that one of the things that somebody mentioned earlier was about extension tasks. That is a great point to take back with you to your centres. Often we set a task, and without perhaps even realising that we're doing this when we're working practically, we stop students and we layer the task up and we extend for those who are ready to move on. In this case, I'm not quite sure what's happened now. Sorry, I'm having a slight technical. Oh, right, everything's back and fine. Thank you, Merlin. When you do that layering and extending of tasks, that needs to go onto your record of work as well. It's not simply that this is the task I set and that's what goes on your record of work. Everything your students do needs to go onto the record of work, and possibly we might have a situation where important things get left off the record of work because the teacher thinks, well, I've written down the main task. Always include all those main sessions. Guys, if you've got a question about scrolling down, I am just going to leave that to Merlin to address, but don't worry, you do have this record of work to take away. We are going to be moving on very shortly because we're going to have a look at a piece of documentary response in just a few minutes, so really don't panic if you can't have a look at that. I'm just going to see if I can see more queries to respond to. Okay. Yeah, Paul says it does open doors for extension tasks, but he agrees it could have been developed further. One task is off-text work, and I'm going to come back. So I've got another one here. Yeah, lesson 5, says Paul, has a flashback of childhood. Is this allowed, as you were told off, or as we were also told off for doing this? And I agree with Ginny, says Lindsay. Last year we were told not to do off-text. Not to do off-text, Lindsay, I will really, really stress that takes you outside the world of the play. And when you are looking at off-text activities, I think it's really important that you think about why. Everything you do for Unit 2 needs to be focused on in furthering your students' understanding of that text. Often, working with the text in 6 hours is going to be enough. Okay, now guys, I do have to say just one thing about the kind of questions that are coming up, and that is you probably were aware that there have been some changes to contracts for employees of examining boards and awarding bodies, which means that one of the things that we can't do is we can't give you advice. That is very strict, it's in our contracts. So questions where if you're asking for advice, what I will do is throw that back up to you to support and respond to each other. But I, as an exam board employee, am not allowed to do that. Also, I can't therefore respond to specific centre queries in terms of feedback you may have got in your moderator reports last year. Again, that's kind of individual attention. It's unfair to other people that are not on this event. So that's the reasoning for it. So apologies for that. What I can do is I can reassure you that I'm the principal moderator for this unit, so you can have some faith in what I'm saying. Okay, Leslie says, if a task is classed as off text, would candidates' marks be changed? I haven't done this, just wondered. Okay, Leslie, I think what you have to be aware of is there are perhaps degrees of an issue with this. 6 hours of exploration. It may well be that within that 6 hours, you've got 5.5 hours of very good, solid, on-text work, and then one task that doesn't meet requirements where you do have the old people's home scenario. You would get a comment in your moderator's report regarding this, but provided that activity didn't fall in your sample session, which is the video sent to your moderator, it would just be a case of that being a comment that was being made. The moderation for practical is entirely based on that sample session. The record of work is a piece of evidence to explain for your moderator what you and your students did. The other area that it may have had an impact is if your students chose to write a good deal about tasks that don't meet requirements. Okay, so just be really careful. And there are times when flashbacks of events that happen within the play can be permissible. I would just say treat with caution, because it's very easy when you start moving away from the play for your students to take it even further away. And our job as always to reel them in. So you have to imagine me miming a big fishing rod at this point. Okay, thank you. Merlin has just told us the document is just a single page. So it's just, the idea is to give you an opportunity to look at just this one exam session. I think those people that are referring to other exam sessions obviously have received the materials and have them to hand. Don't forget, the full pack will be available for you to download at the end. Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments, and I do apologise for the confusion about the single page of the record of work. What we're going to do now is we're going to just go back to thinking about the requirements for documentary response on our PowerPoint. This is what you've been having a look at, is in terms of your record of work. But documentary response to Unit 2, which remember is one of the 2 types of task that students will prepare is going to connect the explored extracts of the play to the whole text. It's going to evaluate how the use of strategies enhanced their understanding and appreciation of the play. And it's also going to evaluate how the play was explored using the elements and medium of drama. So in that very, very short piece of work, the 1,000 words, students have got an awful lot to do. You need to support them as far as possible in making sure that happens. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the documentary response itself now. You've obviously got 5 candidates in the full pack, but we're only going to look at candidate A. So just as we dipped into a bit of moderation by looking at part of the record of work, we're going to dip in by having a look at candidate A's response. And you're going to have the opportunity to vote on which level you would award. Now, it's totally anonymous, the poll, so you can just take a leap of faith and mark it as you would mark it were you the teacher, assessor, or the moderator. It's only 2 pages because it's that 1,000 word piece of work, so it's fairly short, and we're going to allocate you just about 7 minutes to get that done. Then we're going to bring those votes in. Do do the best that you can, and this is going to be the starting point to making sure that you're clear about the standard. And what we'll do is, once the votes are in, is I'll talk you through the mark and the reason for those marks. It'll be interesting to see how well you've got on with that. It can be a bit daunting at first. Merlin's also loaded up for you the assessment criteria so that you can just have a look at what it is that you're assessing those students on. And don't forget, when I say a mark, what I actually mean is a level. They're very close together on this unit because you've got 9 or 10 for outstanding, 7 or 8 for excellent, 5 or 6 for good, 3 or 4 for adequate, 1 or 2 for limited, and 0 for 0. If you come up with a mark or a level, that's the same difference to us. Okay, I'm going to give you a lot of time to kind of read through that in peace without me wittering on, and I will be back in approximately 6 minutes from now. And Sarah, if you're going to see half the page, I think you just need to open that window up a little bit wider. Okay, but I'm sure Merlin is on top of that now. Okay, off you go. Okay, so I'm back, delegates. That is just about 1 minute short of the time that we allowed. It is a little bit of a tight turnaround for getting those levels in, but if you want to have the opportunity just to see how far your level and your assessment corresponds with the marks awarded by the moderator, then go ahead and vote at some point now. We've got 12 votes in, so we're just waiting for just a few more people. Just a couple of things about the moderator commentary that you're going to be sent and able to take away at the end of today's event. It's much more detailed than the comments that you would get as a centre because it's been done for training purposes. The comments that you get on the moderation of your centre as part of your E9 report have to fall under the very strict guidelines, again, of Ofqual, our lovely friends who say that this is the way that it has to be done in all subjects and at all levels. So we're not allowed to give you the very specific type of comments that you get here, but hopefully having these comments will help you to feel that you can get a greater understanding of the standard there. Okay, we've got a few people changing their votes. All right, so I'm going to start talking you through the comments and the marks, and Merlin maybe broadcast those results right now. So just 10 seconds more to vote before those results get broadcast from all of you. Okay, so candidate A in the documentary response. The comments are given in a continuous prose format, comments from the moderator, that is, and the moderator begins by saying the opening paragraph is very descriptive. The candidate does use subject-specific terms accurately, and this is something that we picked up from all the documentary responses from this centre. Also, we're in the position where there are confident references to the taught explorative strategies such as still image and flashback, with a good understanding of the effects of practical decisions in the initial paragraph. There are some real specific examples there which will be helpful for you to go through a bit more carefully later on, but I'll give you the headlines from the rest of the commentary now. The candidate offers some explanation and evaluation of their own work with phrases such as, we did this to communicate, but there is a lack of evaluative detail, as would be seen if a higher level mark had been awarded. There's a secure level of explanation and evaluation of the work of others initially in the documentary response. However, the level of evaluation does improve, e.g. paragraph 4. Good evidence that the candidate has understood the physical change needed when changing between ages in characterisation, although this understanding is not extended further. We've got some evidence in this response of the whole 6 hours, although it's not substantive, and a sense of the candidate lacking the opportunity to develop their own ideas, although it begins to demonstrate some ability to deconstruct and evaluate. A more detailed sense of evaluation will be needed for this student to achieve a higher level. And the mark for this candidate was 6, which is good, which actually is what the majority of you voted. Dominic says, I think overall this shows a good understanding of their own work and the work of others with good specific examples. Absolutely right, spot on, Dominic. I hope you're a moderator, and if you're not, sign up. That's exactly it. It's a commentary where we talked about the lack of extension tasks perhaps for these students in the record of work, and I think that the good quality of this documentary response perhaps shows either that students weren't extended practically and therefore their evaluation couldn't be extended to reflect that, or that this was the ability that the students were at, or some of the students. It's also important to remember that good is still good. It's not necessarily something that we need to worry about, and I think those of us that taught the legacy specification will remember that on those criteria, in that criteria box, all the marks were squished up right in the top 2 boxes. Well, those grade boundaries are much more spread out now for the 2DR1 specification. Okay, so you can feel really, really pleased if you marked it at that level, and if you were a little bit low or a little bit high, then just go back to the documentary response in your own time, make comparisons with the moderator commentary, see if you can understand the reasoning for this. I'm sorry, I'm just glancing in the chat window and being slightly distracted there. The reasoning for this and the reasons why that mark was awarded. Okay, comments from the chat window that came up. Leslie says, it's interesting how the assessment card refers to the candidate as excellent. Now, there's one really important thing you can remember about your moderators. Some people I know do have this image of moderators as little men in cupboards with sticks to beat us all with. And I say us because my work for my students is moderated in exactly the same way as all of yours. They're not, I promise you. They are drama teachers like you and me, working drama teachers who don't do this for the money, I promise you, and actually do it because they love to look at and see the work of young people. In terms of the record card, however, moderators can work out if you're giving somebody a mark of 7 out of 10. That's excellent. You don't need to keep repeating that assessment criteria. It can be a calculated way to try and influence your moderator. But moderators are trained to moderate the work based on its own merits, just as you've just done. Use your controlled assessment record card comments to point your moderator in the direction of where the marks were gained, but be honest, reflect whether there was perhaps an uneven response from that candidate. Perhaps they did peak at excellent, but possibly they dipped down to adequate. And many of our candidates do have that slightly inconsistent feel, particularly if they're writing about different sessions they had different understandings about. Okay, Julie says the candidate shows a good understanding of the text, but a lot of comments could have been explained further and in more depth. Absolutely, that's what would have got that candidate to excellent. And Paul says it's tough with only 1,000 words to add detail for higher grades of 4 strategies. Paul, don't forget though, if you go back to your assessment criteria there, strategies are not a direct focus of this unit. Your students have got the text to write about, they've got the medium that they use, they've got the elements of drama that they encountered as part of their exploration. They're obviously going to write about strategies because that's what they did, they used those strategies. But you don't need to have a direct focus on all 4 strategies as part of the documentary response. You just need to show that students have been exploring the text and they've written about their own work and they've written about the work of others. And yeah, I think it is a tough task, 1,000 words, but it's also important for candidates who are going on to GCE that they learn how to self-edit, how to write concisely and succinctly. And in the legacy specification, we had students producing work that, went over 10,000 words in some cases. And we were really told off by Ofqual about this. And when writing this new specification, the choices were to reduce the word maximum for each task so that we ended up with a reasonable number of words that reflected the amount of marks we were allocating to written work, which in this case is 25% of the marks for the whole specification, or to have more marks attached to written work. So say it would go up to 40%. Well, none of us wanted that. So that's where the concession had to be made. But you can make that concession by reminding your candidates they don't need to write about the use of every strategy for Unit 2. Okay. Julie also says it's tough, but students can use drawings to help communicate their points, which can give them more words for analysis. Yeah, diagrams, screenshots or photographic images can be great, particularly for this unit. Just make sure students don't fall into the trap of sorry, lost my thread now. Again, I'm reading Dominic's comment. That's the problem. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. Who says women can multitask? Students can fall into the trap of narrating and reporting what is in that photographic or that diagrammatic piece of evidence. Make sure that you're getting into practice in the beginning of the programme of study on Unit 2 how to evaluate what that photograph or image is showing. So really good practice there from Julie. And there was a comment higher up from Lindsay about strategies and how they were very strong, but I'd like some guidance on the elements and mediums. Can you choose any 2 to meet your needs? Yes, Lindsay, to meet your needs and meet the needs of your students. And it may well be, and this is what happens with most of us, the mediums we use are levels or space, that's voice, it's movement, it's things that we can easily produce within the context of a normal drama lesson. If you're going to use mediums like lighting and costume to really help students to understand a character better, then make sure it's something that's readily available. A great example that was reported to me, not advice, but an anecdote that I can relate to you, was about a colleague who was exploring Our Country's Good with his students. And if you know the play, it's about officers and convicts in Australia. And the convicts, the students who in this particular session were looking at the convict characterisation, took off their shoes, and the students who were playing the officers had their shoes on. So we had that sense of the vulnerability and status emphasised by use of costume. That would be a great example of how to simply use medium in this kind of session. Okay, we're just coming up to 5 o'clock now, so we are going to break for about 10 minutes to give you a chance to get a cup of something hot to drink and comfort break as required. It's also an opportunity for you to type in questions specifically about the documentary response. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the response to live performance and then dip into a little bit of practical work from the session in the second half. Thank you so much, all of you, for all your comments. It does feel a little bit like I'm a talk radio show talking late at night because it's gone completely dark outside my window. So don't drift off. There is more good stuff coming. See you. Okay, everybody, and hopefully you're back and you've benefited from that brief break. I'm just going to start by looking at a few questions that have come through, we've got several questions that have come through, but I'm not quite sure how many of them are actually ones that I can answer, so I'm just going to be going through these and having a little bit of a look at them. Okay, right, question from Leslie. I've downloaded the standardisation pack, none of the candidates have marks. Can I get this information from anywhere otherwise not standard they are to compare against? Leslie, what you're going to have is a moderator commentary that we'll download at the end of the event, and you can then cross-reference those marks there. Okay, so hopefully that's cleared that one up. And Rachel saying that she can't see the questions, and I'm not quite, I think they must be in where you're supposed to be typing this. So perhaps Merlin, you might be able to address that one from Rachel. And again, we've got some technical questions here from David about getting back to the main question feed there as well. Okay, and I don't think I've got any other specific questions. No, I haven't. I haven't got any specific questions about documentary response, but I am going to put across some information for you, or ask Merlin to do that in a chat window, just because it might well be that you've got questions that you think of a little bit later on. So Merlin, if you wouldn't mind just bringing that chat 8, I think it was, across so that delegates can see it. And what this window is just doing is showing you some information that you can look at as delegates in terms of networking together. So the first thing is that we have got an Edexcel Performing Arts Facebook page, which is a great way of networking. Somebody asked a question earlier about how can I communicate with other delegates. Well, you can only do that via the open chat windows for the purpose of the session, but if you wanted to make contact later on, Facebook page would be a great way of doing that. We've also got a new live Twitter feed, and the link is on there at Edexcel Perth Arts, and then just running into that, also information about Ask the Expert. The email address link for Ask the Expert is gcsedrama@edexcelexperts.co.uk, and just ignore the fact that Paul seems to have run on to the end of that. Paul isn't part of that email address. Paul Webster is the Paul here in this case, and he is one of the people that you may be responded to if you send a question to Ask the Expert. So he's our subject advisor, but you can also contact him directly at the advisor Teaching Performing Arts, and again, I don't know why advisors run into that, Teaching Performing Arts at Pearson.com, and you can find a link to Paul and to Ask the Expert on the homepage for GCSE Drama. Ask the Expert is a service that is staffed by Paul, our subject advisor, myself as the Unit 1 and 2 principal, and Ginny Spooner, who is the Chief Examiner and Principal for Unit 3. So you will get people that do know. So if you think about something and you want a specific question answered, one per email, please do send us an email. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is just think about that next part of the documentary response. Which is your documentary evidence for the response to live performance, and where you're going to be evaluating the use of the drama medium and the elements of drama within the production scene live, and be assessed on the quality of written communication. And in just a moment, Merlin is going to bring up the written communication and evaluation criteria, but just to sort of pick it out for you here, I didn't do this with the first task. I think it's a bit more straightforward when you're just looking at evaluation, but we've got these 4 areas that you might see as a helpful way through when you're doing your marking. You're looking at the actual evaluation, the critical judgments and appreciation as a member of the audience, and a focus on understanding performance elements, something that we can teach them specifically based on the performance that we've taken our students to see. We've also got spelling, punctuation and grammar, key elements of the quality of written communication, and the form and style of writing. Okay, so we're going to take a look at candidate A once again, and candidate A's response to live performance. And you will have the assessment criteria up again, and also the documentary response, the response to live performance, part of the documentary evidence. And once again, opportunity to vote shortly. I was going to talk you through a couple of things about this. Do feel free to start having a look at any of the response if you want to while I'm talking, if you can. Unlike me, do two things at once, go for it. And I'll ask Merlin if he would unsync that document so that you can have a look at it. It actually goes on to 3 pages, so it's a little bit longer. Obviously, the word maximum for Unit 2 documentary response is 1,000 words. For response to live performance, it's 2,000. And often they do tend to be longer. And there's more marks attached, obviously. People ask us sometimes, why is it that the response to live performance includes the criteria for QWC, the quality of written communication? Well, it's because from the legacy specification we knew this was a place where students most commonly wrote in continuous prose and didn't tend to depend on more fragmentary diagrammatic type of evidence and tasks that were more broken up. So it seemed a good continuity from that legacy specification. Also, students often understand what we want them to do a little bit more clearly when they're a member of the audience and they're writing about the performance. Possibly it's something that we do more frequently throughout Key Stage 3 and in other subject areas also. So this seemed to be a good opportunity, and many students do outperform their documentary response marks in the response to live performance, although not by all means all. Okay, you've got the criteria, you have got the response to live performance. Once again, I'm going to stop talking and leave you to it, do bring up some comments if you want to, based on the response to live performance as you think of them. Don't feel you've got to get to the end, and we're going to give you about 10 minutes to have a look at this, so a little bit longer than for the first task, but still you're going to have to work quite fast. Think about skim reading there, guys. Okay, off you go. Hello everybody. Okay, so quite a few of you have started to vote. Just need to apologise that I think that the document that was uploaded didn't have the evaluation criteria for response to live performance, but the correct document is now up there. So if you're feeling a little bit at sea and you want another couple of minutes to just glance at that, then do go ahead and do that. Not to worry though, the idea is just that you are dipping in to this evaluation process and you're really thinking, is it outstanding, is it excellent, is it good, adequate, or limited? And there's quite a range of marks there that people have put in there. Just want to say something before I start giving you the commentary and before I publish the results of the poll, to give people a chance to get those marks in. Just to say that these 2 specific tasks that candidates do in this part of the unit may well be completed at different times. We know that lots of centres take students to the theatre early in year 10, so they've got 1 in the bank, and go again in year 11, and that might be something that you do in your centre. In other centres, we know that candidates do their Unit 2 response at a different time to when they do the Unit 2 practical, and you can make the choice to do that. You don't have to do the response to live performance when you complete the rest of the Unit 2. Obviously, the impact of that is that candidates may be writing at a different level of achievement because time has passed, their skills have got better in terms of maturity and in terms of their ability to use drama language in particular on the written page. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead now and publish those results. So if you wouldn't mind doing that for me, Merlin, that would be great. And I'll start giving you a few of the comments that I think are echoed by the comments that you've suggested on the chat window. Okay, once again, we've got evidence of subject-specific language in this response. So good teaching there. The students have been supported well. The candidate mentions the tone of the play, a good contextual note, evidence of the role of costume in the performance, its significance and what it communicates to the audience, with some excellent observations in this section on the deconstruction of costume. There is discussion of the class system in relation to the play, particularly linked to the use of the timing, 1960s, the recession, the orange doors in the country. So the idea of the fact that we've got a lot of context there that is evaluated in terms of the performance itself rather than in isolation. And that can be a danger, can't it, that students can drift off and write about the play, not about the performance. There's also evidence of a detailed understanding of lighting in the piece, although, you know, possibly some misconceptions there in terms of the language that's being used there. Cantor explains the use of colouring in terms of communicating to the audience, and looks at, briefly, but still looks at the merits of recorded versus live sound, with a bit of discussion about the emotive nature of songs and how they impacted on the audience. QWC, says the moderator, summing up, is secure and largely very accurate throughout. A detailed and solid piece of work, securely placed within the excellent level, mark of 15. So, having published those results, we can see that the vast majority of you were in excellent. We had one person who sneaked this candidate up into outstanding, and then we've got a few people that thought that the response was good as opposed to excellent. So again, that's really encouraging that everyone is marking within the right kind of ballpark. And obviously you are marking in isolation. It's not what a moderator would do, because moderators look at not just one piece of work, but the entire sample of work. And there is always a little bit of jiggery pokery in terms of looking at those pieces of work in context. It's not just one isolated piece of work, it's a moderated sample, because we're not remarking that work, we're moderating it and making adjustments as necessary to be fair to all candidates in that centre and to all candidates outside that centre. Okay, a couple of comments then from people in the chat room about this. Okay, Lindsay says, it's a well thought out essay. The student discussed nearly every aspect of production. So there's a real sense of breadth there, isn't there? There is a comment about word count, and I appreciate that a little bit of a misunderstanding about word count there. But it's worth noting that students who don't use the full word maximum allowable could be said to be self-penalising. Now, there are some students for whom writing 2,000 words, well, you might as well get them to walk around the school perimeter on their hands without stopping, because it's just not going to happen, is it? It's going to be probably easier for them to attempt acrobatics than to complete that 2,000 words. And for those students, we do really have to think, is it worth the time to crack on, forcing them to get up to 2,000 words? And where's the benefit for all those students? But for your more able students, they've got 2,000 words. If they stop at 1,200, it's a little bit like being in a 2-hour exam and stopping after 1 hour and 20 minutes. They're not going to be able to access the same number of marks as somebody else at the same level who's extended and developed their examples more. So that is just a really good point to raise there. And moderators will stop moderating at that 2,000 word mark or at the 1,000 word mark for the documentary response. That is a requirement that we do that. Okay, a really thorough piece of writing, says Amanda, covers the most integral mediums used in the performance, good insights, and the largely good quality of writing with some minor errors. I think overall, though, the level of understanding is what brings it up into excellent there. But you're right, it is very solid and secure. And QWC is noted there as being secure and largely very accurate. We're looking at QWC from the point of view as for a 16-year-old. So where in the criteria it talks about faultless as a kind of descriptive word there, think about it as faultless for a 16-year-old. Julianne says, I think the candidate clearly demonstrates that they understand production values with the reference to costume designer, etc. And there are specific terminology used helpfully there with some detailed examples, but they could be more detailed, and only some minor QWC errors. We're not looking for errors to bring it down. We're trying to make a judgment about not just the punctuation, spelling and grammar, but the chosen form and style. And this chosen form and style does work extremely well. It's got an informal quality, but there's sufficiently formal quality to the writing. It's a candidate's own personal response, so that's where the informality comes in, but the formality in terms of that technical language, that drama language. So we must make sure that we're using QWC as a chance to reward students, not just to think, oh well, they've made a few spelling mistakes and let's move the mark down. And you might find that your best fit between those two elements of the criteria means you're actually moving some students up because the quality of their written communication is better than their evaluation. Kit says the language used is good, technical language, there is clear insight into the play and the director's intentions, and that's important, isn't it? And that's difficult for students to understand sometimes, that the director has had very specific intentions there. Again, with only QWC, only minor errors there in QWC. So really helpful and positive comments there from everybody. Thank you so much. And don't forget, you've got the whole moderator commentary to take away with you at the end of today's event. And that's not something that's been published online and won't be published online until the end of this term. So that is just because you attended this event today. Okay, we're going to have a look now at the sample session. And if you wouldn't mind, Merlin, bring me back to my PowerPoint, just to have a think about the practical element of the course, and then we're going to have a look at a very brief section of the DVD that you will have been sent in your centre, and if you haven't, don't forget, I'm going to tell you how to get hold of that. Okay, so in the sample session, what are we looking for as moderators? What is it that we need to see? It's important to think about this because although it's not a requirement that you as a teacher watches that sample session, it's undoubtedly extremely good practice to do so. Just as your moderator can't stand in the studio with you, you can't understand your moderator's adjustments until you've seen the evidence that you provided your moderator with. So I can't stress enough what a good practice it would be, particularly in terms of the standardisation exercise if you've got more than one group and more than one colleague within your department teaching GCSE drama. We're looking in that sample session for clear evidence for each of the sample students. Evidence of work in progress. And I think that's an important phrase because we are looking at a process. We're not looking at an outcome in this sample session. It may well be that outcomes from along the way will materialise, that a task will be set and work will be shared, and then the task will be developed or a new task will be set, and that is absolutely within the grounds of what is permitted and what's required for the unit. But generally speaking, this is a 6-hour explorative process, and that's what we want to see sampled on this session. A sense of development of ideas throughout the session. This is where I think a lot of you picked up with the record of work for this centre about tasks being set and not extended, not developed. If there's development in terms of the planned tasks, we want to see the ideas about the text for Unit 2, about characters, about motive, about emotion, about building of tension, all being developed within the appropriate tasks as set. And some students will develop their ideas further than others, and that is going to reflect on the marks that are awarded for those students. And a clear focus on exploring the text practically. A lot of you ask questions about off-text, and if you're worried about off-text, the best advice I can give you is to make sure that you've got a very text-based session for your sample session, and to choose activities clearly where you can make sure that your students will have evidence presented as part of that DVD. Make sure we can see them and we can hear them at various points. Okay, all right, Merlin is going to load up for us now the DVD extract from a sample session. Now it's beautifully chapterized, as you'll see when you get this DVD. At the beginning of the chapters, you've got an introductory session which shows the identification for all of the students. Okay, now because we've only got this very, very small window of time, obviously we're not going to be able to do standardisation and marking, but what we are going to consider is how far can teacher assessors use the sample session to show evidence of the levels at which students are working? That was one of the things that I said we needed, wasn't it, from the students. And what I'm going to do is, as the session is running, I'm going to point out to you who are the students that you will be looking at when you do this exercise back in your centres. And you can see, is this work actually being clearly exemplified? Okay, so it's going to, Merlin, if you press play for me straight away, and if you think of anything, do type it into the box. Now, we can see over here on the left-hand side where my cursor is that we have candidate H, who is a black female wearing a blue shirt, and she is working in this group here, and she's one of the sample candidates. We've also got in this group here, moving his arms around and talking to his two other colleagues, candidate G. So he's another one of the sample candidates, and then we're also going to have in a moment candidate F, who is blocked from view at the moment, and I'll show him to you as soon as I can identify him. Okay, and he's in this group at the back here. Here he is, and he's got a black jumper on. He's a small, thin black boy, and he's hidden again. Okay, so this is just really to give you an insight into what one centre has presented for moderation. When you look at this yourself to moderate, we've actually got some graphics that come up every so often during the session to remind you who it is you're looking for. But how can you make it easy if you're a moderator to see these different kind of candidates and to get some assessment of the work they're doing? I mean, obviously, you know, it's easier with some than others in terms of location in the room, so that's something that is worth thinking about. But you might have some good practice in your centre that you'd like to share, or some thoughts on what this centre could have done to make identification easier for the students. And just something else to bear in mind, and that is that obviously we, for our standardisation exercise, we've only included 3 candidates, and those 3 candidates are your sample students for this purpose, but you would always select 5 unless you had a group that was smaller than 5 here. Okay, I'm just coming towards the end of this extract, and I think at the end you should be able to see all 3 candidates, and they're just, here we go, and they're just sharing to the class simultaneously those still images. Okay, so we've got a few suggestions here from people. Leslie says, it's really hard when students are in uniform. We ask them to wear their own top on assessment days for easier identification. Great idea. Own clothes does make it a bit easier than school uniform. And Julie says, yeah, we also have our students wearing their own clothes also so they can move around more comfortably and be more expressive. And it might well be they feel more comfortable if they are in their own clothes. See, it depends on your centre though, doesn't it? It depends on what you're going to be permitted to do within the context of your drama lessons. Kit says just set to his own class, bring their own top in. And Leslie says, this is a great idea, Leslie. We carousel students around so everyone has time nearest the camera. You notice that in this particular video that we looked at, the camera was fixed with no zooming and panning. And many of us, although we're permitted to zoom and pan, you haven't got time to zoom and pan because you are too busy facilitating the work of the students. That's got to be such an important thing. If you can train your students to move around the space, to rotate every 5 minutes or every 7 minutes, so that we have got not always the same group stuck in the furthest corner from the camera, and the same group closest to the camera. Really, really important and helpful to do that. David says we use bibs with numbers. This is increasingly popular. Lots and lots of centres are starting to do that, and I was told with great confidence at INSET on Monday at a live event that the cost of them is about £2 from the same supplier that your sports teachers and PE department would be using. So, you know, an investment that could well be within your means. And they can therefore use the same bib during every assessed lesson. Lindsay says, as a moderator myself, as long as there is a clear lineup where they say their name and candidate number at the start, it was fine. And I think that is a good point, Lindsay. Moderators are trained to identify students, but it's important as well to think about all the time, how we can make it easier. And Lindsay, what I would also add is that the students that we selected from this centre were not the same students that the centre selected for moderation. So just to add that one in there. I think in this case, this was a centre who perhaps just hadn't had the time to review the DVD and to look at how students that they know so very well, who look so very different to them, perhaps did look quite similar in some aspects of that DVD. Julie says, wouldn't it be quite disruptive for students moving around at the room every 7 minutes or so? Lots of centres do it, Julie, and all I can say is I think it's about real long forward planning so that they are getting used to the idea that they don't just work in one part of the room during any drama session. So they're not just doing it for the sample session, they are used to moving around the room in many of their exploration sessions. And I think it won't be disruptive once they're used to doing it. Is what colleagues have said. And Leslie says, oh yes, after each task, and yes, that will be better. And obviously you've got to make it fit to the work that you set them and the tasks that you've set them. Excuse me. Okay. One more thing though, Lindsay mentioned that lineup and all of your students lining up to identify themselves at the very, very beginning. And the fact that you've got all of your students, maybe 35, all need to identify themselves for the moderator. Some people do ask us, is it okay just to identify the 5 sample students? And the answer to that is not unless you're editing that initial lineup after the session, because you must select those students that are your sample students at the end of the session. We talked about consistency of response within the written work. Within a 6-hour scheme of work, students can dip and they can outperform your expectations. And you're not going to know, not entirely, who's going to be your top or your bottom, although you can probably make a pretty safe guess about the middle. If you do a bit of editing, then make sure that's clearly noted on the paperwork on your D2B in this case, which is your video timesheet, where there is a box for comments. So make sure that's clear so the moderator is not under any misconceptions. Okay, Mel, if you want to load up any questions that we've got, we probably haven't got many. I think we've answered a lot of questions about the sample session, but if there are any questions that you feel haven't been answered yet or that you would like to be answered, then do go ahead and type those in now, because we have a little bit of more time now. Just going to remind you about the support options that are available to you in terms of Ask the Expert and our subject advisor, Mr. Paul Webster. All information is up there. I'm also going to bring up the slide for you now for anyone who didn't get a copy of the DVD. And this is the instructions on the PowerPoint as to how to access that DVD. It is a free publication, so although you're going through publications, when you put into this code, the cost will be 0, and that will be sent to your centre free of charge. And it's 1 allocation per centre, so if you haven't received it, and it could just be because your exams officer hasn't yet entered your students for an Excel, or perhaps you didn't enter students last year for some reason, and that might be why it hasn't come through to you, or it could just be an error and you should have received one. So if you haven't got one, do make sure that you go into the publications website through edXL Online. That results plus password login. This is something that I'm going to just remind you that is available through your exams officer. Some exams officers are quite particular about giving out that information, but if the exams officer doesn't want to give you the password, then they're going to need to order that publication for you. So I'm pretty sure they would, most officers would then be quite keen to reduce their workload by doing that. But it is a very straightforward process to go ahead and do that. Okay, just going to see if we've got any questions that I haven't answered as yet. Okay, and I've got a question from Claire here. Good one, Claire. Do students have to review the same play for their play reviews? The same play, I presume, as the play that they explored in Unit 2. Claire, they may do, but they don't have to. And there could be instances where you think that it would be helpful and supportive for them to see a play and then to explore it practically. It might be that having seen the play, they feel they've done it, and then to go and do it again might not be the best thing for those students. It's all about what's best for them, but certainly it is permitted. Stephanie says, are there marks available for the other candidates? Stephanie, I think what you mean is for candidates B, C, D, and E, yes, there are, and they're all on the document, the moderator commentary that you will be able to take away with you at the end of the exercise, the end of the event, together with marks for the 3 candidates that we've sampled for practical. Julianne, last year, after I filmed the sample session and all the candidates introduced themselves to the camera, I printed out pictures of the 5 sample students from the DVD. Well, again, excellent practice, because, imagine your moderator, living room, big 40-inch DVD player with a screen and curtains drawn, and everybody else is skipping around the sunshine, and moderator's in Sunday afternoon, and they look at that lineup and then they start watching the DVD, and possibly people's hair is in a different arrangement, or maybe they just look different because they're a bit further away from the camera. Having that visual cue of a photograph is so helpful, and I can't recommend it enough. If it's something that you can do easily, if you can't, then just make sure it's clear to identify them. Amanda says, if the students on the sample are marked accurately, but their overall practical mark is higher, is it acceptable, or will marks be altered to match the sample? Amanda, what we would expect is that your sample students' marks will show a correlation between the marks for the 1 hour or the sample session and their marks for the 6 hours. And by a correlation, we mean we can understand where those marks came from. So somebody who earned 31 overall might be a 29 on the DVD, or they might be a 33. I think where alarm bells start ringing for moderators would be if you see that all the marks on the sample session are completely different from the marks on the optimus for the 6 hours. And in that case, you might find that moderators would come back to you to say, are these marks correct? But in the meantime, yes, you can have a different mark between those 2 sets of marks. And students will not just perform at the same level for every session, will they? There is going to be a little bit of up and down on that. Okay, and Claire says, oh, sorry, I meant in terms of their control assessment review, do they all have to write about the play we saw together, or can they write about one they saw on their own? Again, a really good point, Claire. Somebody misses the theatre trip that you organised, but they've been to see Wicked with mum and dad up to London for a trip, and they can write about that. Or you could get them in to watch some drama that's happening in your centre, and they could write about that instead. Obviously, if they write about something that you haven't taken them to, it's going to be much harder for you to support them, but there's no reason why they can't write about different performances. And equally, it might be that you've taken them to see 2 different performances and you submit the best response for each candidate, provided that all of those responses were done under controlled assessment conditions. Okay, Shamamara says, the pack that clears, talking about the moderator's marks and comments for the candidate. Yes, it is, Shamira, absolutely. It's the pack that you're going to have to take away with you at the end of this session. And Merlin, I think, has answered that query as well. Okay. I think we should be getting to the end of the questions there. If you've got any more questions, we have got a few minutes left. Do feel that you can answer those, ask those questions to be answered straight away. Equally, don't forget that if you think of something 2 minutes after we've logged on, or 2 hours after we've logged off, and you want to email us the expert, I'd be very happy to answer your questions there. We've looked at some of the support that is available to you in terms of Ask the Expert, in terms of our subject advisor, and I hope that you will take good advantage of those. And just want to thank you all for being such a lovely group of delegates and for putting up with 1 or 2 technical issues that we had today. Obviously, these events don't always run as smoothly as we would like, but you've been extremely patient and understanding of the technology there. If anyone else has got a question they'd like to have answered, please do send it in. I'm just checking through to see if I've got anything else from anyone at this stage. And in just a moment I will sign off and Merlin will talk you through. Okay, Julie asked me a question, which is, not received a moderation pack at our centre, how do I get one? Julie, it's the PowerPoint screen that is on your screen at the moment, the PowerPoint slide, and it's that publications website that I was talking about. So you go to Edexcel Online, you log in using that results plus password and username, enter your centre number, select Edexcel Publications, you've got the very specific code to enter there, click on add-on cart, view cart and checkout. So hopefully that is really, really clear. And Claire says, in terms of documentary response, is it okay to set specific tasks for them to answer in controlled conditions? Yes, it is, Claire. And I think I would really suggest that you go back to the Control Assessment Teacher Guide, which gives you lots of different examples of things that you can and can't do. Also, remember right at the beginning of the event, I showed you those exemplar and example material documents where you've got examples of what students actually did. And you can see that they've responded in some cases to separately set tasks and questions. And that can be really very useful. Okay, and thank you from Lindsay. That's lovely, Lindsay. I'm glad you found it helpful and informative. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Merlin now, just to kind of wrap things up. I'm glad you find it useful. Don't forget to have a look for the Unit 1 events when that comes online, because you'll be able to find out the questions that other people asked, and you also get some useful information from that. And I believe there's also going to be a new to Edexcel event, which gives an overview of the whole specification online. Thank you very much, and good evening to you.